thriller, mystery, and horror books coming out in September. If you don't know me, I'm Carrie, and I read a book a day to give you the best thriller, mystery, and horror book recommendations, so if you're into that, make sure to give me a follow. September 1st, we have 8 releases. Kiss, Slay, Replay by Rachel Harrison is a comedic horror book that follows a woman who is stuck in a time loop while attending a wedding and forced to endure a magnitude of horrors. An Immaculate Deception by Isabella Lavino is a historical Brazilian horror following a young woman who finds herself pregnant out of wedlock and wakes up in the secluded home of her child's father, where she has to uncover the truth behind some dark secrets before she's destroyed. Mother, Daughter, Sister, Stranger by Hank Phillippi Ryan is a mystery thriller that follows a sister that is looking into her sister's disappearance 11 years after a plane crash that took their parents' lives. Tell the Ghosts I'm Gone by Kaylin Bayron is a YA horror book that follows a group of friends who are paranormal investigators who take on a ghost hunting job and soon find themselves facing dangerous supernatural forces. We Are for the Dark by Gretchen McNeil is a supernatural investigative style mystery that follows the investigation into a missing priest that turns into a fight for survival against an ancient hungry evil. The Eye of Goliath by Diego Mazzio is a gothic historical Argentinian psychological horror that follows a war veteran and psychologist who's treating a man with a very strange condition seems to be set off after he inspected a lighthouse on a secluded island. Blacktail by Scott Hawkins is a fantasy horror that follows a wolf that is seeking vengeance for the murder of his mate and unborn pups. Before You Were Anne by Amiko Jean is the second book in the Chelsea Calhoun series. It's a thriller that follows Detective Calhoun as she investigates the murder of a mother and the disappearance of her daughter. On September 8th, we have 12 releases. She's a Doll by Barbara Truelove is a darkly comedic literary horror that follows a woman who is seeking vengeance against the man who killed her while her spirit inhabits the body of an 18-inch porcelain doll. Driven by Mason Coyle is a near-future sci-fi thriller that follows a man who is stuck in a self-driving car. Murder on the Upper East Side by Gigi Waldorf is a dual timeline mystery thriller that takes place in the elite world of the Upper East Side. Strange as a Light by Sarah Maria Griffin is a fantasy sci-fi horror that follows a group of childhood friends who reunite 20 years after playing a role-playing game where they accidentally opened another dimension. All Hallows Eve is by various horror authors, and it's a collection of short stories about Halloween. Wildwood by Ashley Wu is a gothic mystery that follows a pregnant, jobless woman who inherits a home and soon uncovers dark family secrets. Pictures of You by Josh Mallerman is a literary horror book that follows a man who is searching for his missing fiancée, who has now become the subject of an artist's strange experiment. The Wellness Retreat by Dawn Kurtigich follows a former cellist who travels to a remote Scottish island wellness retreat in order to find her sister, just to uncover the sinister secrets of this retreat. We Turn Gruesome at Night by Eric LaRocca is the second book in the Burnt Sparrow trilogy. It's a horror book that follows our main character from book 1 as he's introduced to a secret society and soon uncovers sinister secrets. A Beautiful Lie by Tanya Grant is a psychological thriller following a home organizer who is invited to a client's summer home, and then when she gets there, decides that she doesn't really want to leave. We Already Dug the Grave by Emma C. Wells is a thriller following two sisters who find themselves plotting the murder of one of their husbands. Laws of Solomon by Eric LaSala is the fourth book in the Martyr Maker series, and this is a thriller following a man who has left his dangerous past behind him, but now he's forced back into a dangerous lifestyle in order to protect a child. On September 10th, we have a UK release and a Kindle Unlimited release. Releasing in the UK, Serenity Falls by CJ Tudor. This is a horror thriller that follows a family who wants to leave their past behind, so they move from the UK to an idyllic town that was established 50 years ago in the US that has zero crime, only for a body to be discovered in their pool. The first of many strange discoveries. The Kindle Unlimited release is A Perfect Mother by Miranda Smith, and this is a psychological thriller following a mother who is searching for their missing child who vanished after their nanny was attacked. On September 15th, we have 8 releases. Deadly Little Lessons by Danielle Valentine is a YA thriller that is described as high school Squid Game. It follows a troubled teen who attends an elite experimental school where the students must participate in deadly obstacles. Unearthed is by various horror authors, and it's a collection of short stories exploring ancient burial sites. Rooted by Leopold Gold is a horror story following an art lawyer who returns to Mexico City for the celebration of the reparation of many stolen artifacts, whose life begins to spiral as divine forces are awakened. I Am the Monster Under the Bed by Emily Zinnicas is a horror book that follows a woman who is suspected to be the perpetrator of a tragedy where she was the sole survivor. Her identity has just been exposed and she is forced back to her hometown, back to the monster that she left behind, and soon finds herself becoming the villain everyone thinks that she already is. Sleep Well Mommy by Maya Seo is a psychological thriller following a psychiatrist whose interview with a serial killer has an unexpected effect on her relationship with her stepdaughter. Something of a Calling by Zoya Stage is an eco-horror novella that follows a soon-to-be retired detective as she investigates a series of murders where all the victims have a very strange bite mark. We're All Gonna Die Tonight by Veronica Bain is a YA thriller that follows a group of teens who find themselves forced to spend a deadly night together during a storm. A Thousand Monstrous Forms by Saratoga Schaefer is a gothic queer horror reimagining of Bluebeard. It follows an artist who grows increasingly suspicious of her new wife as she moves into her sprawling, secluded home. We have 15 releases on September 22nd. It's Not What You Think by Claire McIntosh is a thriller that follows a woman who believes that her boyfriend is cheating on her, so she rushes home to confront him just to find out that he's dead. She dives headfirst into a murder investigation. Van Death by Brian Osmond is a horror thriller that follows two feuding van life influencers who are forced to band together to survive a masked killer. Hail Mary by Elizabeth Urzo is a horror thriller that follows a woman who moves back to her hometown and haunted family business where secrets and cold cases refuse to stay buried. Traps and Spectres by Philip Farkasi is a collection of short horror stories and novellas. Maisie Wood by Tananarive Due is a literary horror that follows the grandson of a famous Black actress who returns to her remote cabin retreat only to encounter the legacy of her rage born in old Hollywood. The Henchperson's Guide to Ununionizing by Michael J. Moore is a fantasy horror following three quirky assistants that live in a manor who are trying to stop their powerful masters from destroying the world. In the Woods They Wait by Carrie Lee South is a southern gothic horror following a park ranger who is searching for a missing girl in the same woods that her brother vanished from many years ago. Soon she starts to suspect that a creature is responsible for both disappearances. Worry Box by Chris Panettiere is a horror book following a family that moves into a new home for their growing family. They are in the process of adopting their foster daughter, but as her adoption day nears, the child's intrusive thoughts take a sinister turn. Incarnate by Alma Katsu is a techno-horror reimagining of the picture of Dorian Gray, following an influencer as she takes a job at a deepfake technology company where she creates a mega-viral virtual influencer. But unfortunately, things take a sinister turn. Littlekin by Katya de Bucera is a dark fantasy folk horror that follows a woman who inherits a house near the Arctic Circle and soon discovers that the community operates under very strict and strange rules. Our Cut of Salt by Dina Helm is a paranormal literary horror book, and it follows three generations of Palestinian women as they confront the haunting of their ancestral home. Call Off the Dark by Hallie Shepard is a psychological thriller that follows a woman who moves with her new husband off the grid when a man claiming to be her husband's dead brother arrives and changes everything. The Need by Megan Mostyn Brown is a dark family drama suspense that follows a family that is plagued with a strange genetic condition that causes them to crave human flesh as they change their identities and move from town to town in order to evade detection. Crone by Keith Rawson is a horror noir following an ex-detective who is indebted to a gang whose daughter vanished 10 years ago, and he is forced back to investigating when he is forced to find a killer by the gang. Sometimes I Scare Myself by Geneva Rose is a collection of short horror stories from the author who gave us The Perfect Marriage. And lastly, on September 29th, we have 7 releases. Something Followed Us Home is by various Latin horror authors, and it's a collection of short Latin horror stories. The Memory Tree by Heather Davey is a gothic folk horror book that follows a family that moves to a strange little town where a yew tree lives on a graveyard near their house. It soon starts to bring headaches, visions, and unfamiliar memories. Tradwife by Sarah Langan is a supernatural horror book that follows a journalist who soon uncovers the sinister secret behind a very popular Tradwife influencer's success. Beyond the Graves Waits Miss Dempsey by Kathleen Kaufman is a fantasy horror book that follows a marine biologist who is searching for an undiscovered octopus species, and her search leads her to an island that soon uncovers her own dark secrets. House of Gardenias by Isabel Cañas is a YA gothic horror book that follows a battered teen who escapes from her abusive household and becomes the maid for an elderly woman. When political terror erupts in Mexico, the pair retreats to a place known as the House of Gardenias, and soon discover that this ancient estate is home to far more terrifying sinister forces. Nightjars by Michael Wehunt is a horror following a man who is exposed for crimes that he doesn't remember committing. Newburn Park by Jennifer Thorne is a horror book that follows a woman who joins her brother at a mansion where his friend works, thinking that they have the place all to themselves and that they can let loose, just to be confronted by the owner, who is not alone, and with him is something vicious and hungry. Thank you so much for watching. Please drop me a comment and let me know which of these books you're most excited to read. And if you got early access to any of these titles, please let me know your thoughts in the comments.